today we're going to be swapping out a USB-C port on a Samsung Galaxy phone. So some of the things that you want to watch out for is overheating the board. A lot of these components can flip off or cause shorts under underflow items on the other side of the board. So what we want to do is block off anything that you can damage with heat. Another thing we want to do is apply low melt solder to the joints that we're going to be heating to reduce the amount of temperature that we have to apply. So we're going to go ahead and move forward with that. Alright, so first thing you want to do is go ahead and apply flux. So when you're applying the solder, you do want to make sure it's a low melt, so it has to be leaded solder. Or even better, you can do quick chip, which would really reduce it by quite a bit. But for right now, we're just going to apply normal leaded solder, and then we're going to apply heat afterwards. So you want to keep in mind that when you're soldering, you don't want to apply the solder directly to the tip of the iron. You want to put the iron on the actual contact and then apply solder. This way you're not burning off the flux that's inside the solder early, and it'll make it a little easier on you. So from the looks of this device, it looks like it may have been exposed to water recently. There's a couple components that's currently around this circuit that has corrosion. So looking at this, you can see an FPC connector right below the port. You want to keep in mind that that is plastic, so when you're using hot air, you can melt that pretty easy. So when you're applying hot air, you do want to direct the heat away from that FPC connector. So what we do is we apply heat sinks to create a larger thermal mass. That way you're not applying as much heat and everything. So we're going to be using 365 heat. That would be in Celsius. We're going to go ahead and use 60 air because we are working on a small motherboard. So you don't want to overheat anything. So you apply the air, you keep it in a circular motion. You don't want to overheat one area, overheat it. So what I normally do is I'll heat it, and when you see the solder start melting like this, you want to make sure all of them's melted, especially these little pins. Then you can just flick this right off the board. Easy as that. Alright, so that port is off. The port was damaged according to the client, which was a shop out of state. So it does look like a pad barely came up, which would probably explain why it wasn't charging as well. But it looks like the V is still there, which I'll show you right now what that is. So if you see this, where that contact is actually missing, that could be from corrosion. Looking at this line right here, this trace, goes right to that contact. So it's still there, so when we're soldering it down, it'll still have contact, so we should be okay. Alright, so what you want to do is get rid of the old solder. So you want to go ahead and apply solder braid, and make sure all the solder's gone. So that has a lot of solder absorbed now, so what I'm going to go ahead and do is cut off that bad end. That way we can start fresh. So you want to be really gentle when you're doing this kind of work, because if you pull these traces, you're going to have to run jumpers, which we'll cover that in a later course. Looks like that's where that trace went. Alright, so let's go ahead and get the solder out of these through-hole ports, because you want this port to actually sit flush. Oh baby. Alright, I'll charge it. Just one moment. My daughter apparently needs her phone charged. Come here. Alright, go ahead and go in there and watch TV. I'll charge it. Yep. Alright, so we're picking off where we left. Let's see. So it looks like it's starting to give me an issue on melting, so we're going to go ahead and apply more flux. Okay, I'll be in a minute. Go. Alright. So ports are probably one of the easiest jobs you're going to have when soldering. You just got to be really gentle about how much air you apply, because you got to keep in mind that there's components on the other side of the board that you can float really easy. Alright, so what we're going to do is get rid of this old flux, so we're going to go ahead and clean that off. So it looks like there is some circle ports here, well, contacts. So we're going to go ahead and look on the port to see if that's needed. So looking at the port, you can tell that we do need to have those cleaned as well, so we're going to go ahead and clean that and go ahead and apply some solder, not solder, but flux as well. So we're going to need a smaller soldering iron, so I'm going to grab my micro pencil real quick. We're going to go ahead and flip this over and see if there's maybe some solder on the other side. Go ahead and come back for part 2 of applying the port, because I have to deal with the client right now. Alright, so the goal is to get this flush as possible. You don't want it to actually have a gap. So what we're going to do is go ahead and solder this on. You will want to make sure you use leaded solder though. So you go ahead and apply flux. So the first thing you always want to do is go ahead and anchor this down by using the ground pins on the side. This way it will set flush and it won't move on you. So go ahead and apply flux, or not flux, but solder on the actual iron. Press down really tight and go ahead and just tack it. So once you get this tacked down, then you're going to want to go ahead and go through and tack all the pins down. So if you see it raising, like it gives that little swirl to it, what that means is you don't have enough flux. So this right here. So you're going to want to apply flux and hit it with the iron again. Alright, so now it's going to be time to do the pins. Just make sure you don't bridge anything, which is really easy to do. So what I like to do is go through and tack each one. Go ahead and move this block out of my way. So what we're going to do is go ahead and move this to where you guys can see it a little better. So I just apply a little solder to my actual solder iron. Don't apply too much to your soldering iron, otherwise you'll bridge it like that. So I'm going to go through and just get them all and then use the soldering braid to get it. As you can see, it's really easy to make mistakes. Just go through, get it off. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and go through and check each pin in a second. Alright, so let's go ahead and get that cleaned up and get a good look at it. So what I'm using to clean the board is acetone. You can buy that at any store in the beauty section. As you can see that there's no bridges. There looks like there is one right there, but that's just oat flux, which I'll get off in a minute. See, this is why we clean, because I actually found a bridge. If you look closely, I'll show you it. So it looks like there's one right here, and right here. So you're gonna want to clear that out real quick. Easy as that. So it looks like we're going to need some braid to get that off. We're probably going to go ahead and clean these components around here as well, because it looks like the water actually corroded it pretty good. So after you get done soldering, the general tip is to make sure you go through and nudge each pin to make sure there's no movement. Because if there's movement, you're going to definitely want to hit it again. As you can see that there's no movement on these pins at all, which would indicate a good pin. Alright, so it looks like that this one is actually done. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how we clean components as well. So if you're looking at this, you can obviously see the massive corrosion. Customer sent it for no charge, but I think his main issue is this corrosion and not the actual charge port like he thought. Because it appears that this is the LCD connector as well. Always make sure when you're working on client stuff or yours, always clean up after yourself, because you don't want to leave a mess. So right now I'm using alcohol to clean this up, which is 99%. So that concludes this job. So if you look, all of them are perfect, but one looks like it's bridge, but it's not. It's actually the plastic. So I'll show you. So it's just the plastic. And you're seeing the reflection as well, which I can assure you it's not bridged. Alright, well, you guys have a great day. If you find out anything that you want me to record, just let me know.